Hello, I'm Jorge Briceño, Director of Instructional Television for KLCS. We hope you enjoyed KLCS's presentation of Teach. Right now, I am honored to be joined by teachers from various school districts around the Southland, including Long Beach, Norwalk, Walnut, West Covina, and Los Angeles Unified. We're here to discuss the themes and issues that were compellingly documented in the film. I want to get right into the discussion and hear what our in-studio teachers thought about the film we just saw. But first, we are honored to be joined by Joel Laguna, who was featured in Teach. And Joel, I've been meaning to ask, I'm so glad I have this opportunity. Update us on where Mixley's at and what's going on with her.
Dude, Mixley's doing great. She's in AP Language, as well as Jennifer and Gilbert and the rest of my students are all doing amazing right now.
Excellent. Well, you know what? I want to jump right into the conversation. And the movie ended with the question, well, it proposes that it's a terrible pay. Well, not terrible pay. It's challenging conditions. The pay isn't great. Why do you do it? Okay. And I really am interested in knowing. I know we talked a little bit beforehand. You have so many different varied experiences, and I want to know, why do you do it? So I am going to start with Warren, who I know well and did it for a very, very long time. Warren, what prompted you day in and day out to get out of bed and face those challenges?
For me, teaching was my third career. Once I got into the classroom, I found it to be the most challenging and exciting place, but to be able to look in those kids' eyes and watch the lights come on, you can't get any better than that.
Now, I see a lot of heads nodding, and I know that you know, it varies for everybody, but I want to hear from the different perspectives, the different voices. I know we have teachers who are newer teachers, and you know, I'm gonna pick on you only because we were talking a little bit earlier. I remember in the classroom, they told me ahead of time, you know, when I was teaching, like, there's gonna be this curve, you know, and it's gonna start here, and you're gonna be excited, and then it's gonna come spring, and you know, it's gonna go this way. I know some of the people at spring are already in this curve. When it gets that difficult, when you're faced with these kind of challenges, how deep do you have to dig in to get up again? And so I'm gonna pick on you because we were talking about this earlier.
What do I got to do to get up in the morning? I enjoy it every day still. It's much more challenging right now. Our spring break was so late this year. The kids were totally ready to go. I was ready to go. But I think that basically it's exactly what he's talking about. The fact that you can get a kid to walk into your classroom feeling like he has no idea how to do something, and in 84 minutes have him proving the quadratic formula is pretty awesome feeling.
Now, there's another theme that I really want to touch on, and that is we heard it over and over in the film, and that was the idea of perseverance, both from the teacher's perspective and from the student's perspective. And one thing that struck me was every time something got challenging, there was a conversation of, then you have to go the extra mile. And I can think, well, how many extra miles are there? You know, and why do they just keep saying the one extra? You go extra miles. So I'd like to hear about situations where you've had to, again, find that internal fortitude to go that extra mile. And what does that mean to you? Becky?
You know, there's so many extra miles, you're right. And you just think you're running out of steam. And I know for many of us, the spring is always, you know, the marker. And, you know, films like this inspire. And we need to, as teachers, to remind ourselves, I constantly need sometimes just support from my colleagues or administrators or parents, and films like this. And I was mentioning to someone else earlier that I saw Stand and Deliver on the show, and you know, I remember when I was so down, and I just like, I bought it. I bought the video. I own it, and I watch it, you know, because it's things like that you remember. Yes, you know, and you want the kids to do well, and you know they come from really difficult places, most of them. So, you know, we have many miles.
Recently, I was asked, like, what do you do with a child who's given up? Like, how do you reach them as a teacher? And my biggest response is, you don't give up. And your kids see that, and even when they've given up, you just keep trying and you keep trying, and your kids will respond to that. Even if it's at the very end of the year, your kids will still look back and say, that teacher never gave up on me.
Let me ask this, because you talk about not giving up, and we got to see in the film, and it was your words as well as other teachers, the idea that you take failure so personally. when inevitably it happens. And it was your mentor that said you have to fail 1,000 times, you know, to be a good teacher. it's does it get, and I'm hope somebody who has more, veteran, one of our veteran teachers here will chime in. Does it get easier with time to accept that failure? Not that you say it's okay to fail, but don't beat yourself up and know that you are a good teacher. Does it get better? I'm picking on you. Yes, I'm sorry. You were nodding very, very.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that when you teach and you're reaching those kids, even if they're not meeting, the goals that you expected for them, because you set your sights so high, and you maintain those expectations, they go right up there with you. So even if they don't make the growth that you wanted or what the district expected, you know the impact that you had on that kid, and you don't take their test scores personally because it's not always an accurate reflection of what's being learned in class. And so, I think about, to keep me going, when maybe they didn't test as well, the bond that I have with that kid, and seeing those kids every day is, I think, what keeps that positive attitude, because they can maintain that if you maintain the positivity.
I agree. I think before you can start teaching anything, math, writing, any academics, it's the relational teaching. Yes. You need to get that bond, you need to get that hook with that kid. What do they like? They want to know your stories too. So in my class, I do a lot of storytelling. I tell them little stories about me, when I was a kid, little mistakes that I used to do. And I find that the little storytelling really engages them, and better than a book that I would ever have. It's like, hey, you guys want to hear a story? They're like, yes. Tell me what you got. And I have so many stories from myself, and coming from a big family, I think that was my training, leading me up to where I am now as a teacher.
I think a lot of it too is just a spirit of growth and renewal. When I notice this is kind of a pattern of when you see, it's not really failure, it's a matter of seeing it that a stumbling block in a way, and now you have a new challenge to try to face at a new angle. And so that's what I love about teaching. I try to renew myself with is the fact that when I find this new challenge, well, now my job just shifted again, and I get to see it from a new light. And I try to keep it like each day is a different day, which is something I like a lot about teaching.
Absolutely. The art of reflection is what makes a good teacher. And your failures aren't really failures. They're learning. You're learning something from it. So, and that's what we try to teach our students, is that you need to try and possibly fail, but learn something from it. So as teachers, we have to be role models.
Let me dig a little bit deeper into the idea of the art of reflection, because it requires being able to accept the fact that you don't know everything. And you're the teacher, and you have, 25, 30, 40 kids looking at you, expecting you. I still remember to this day, my first day, and all these kids looking up at me like, come on, I dare you, teach me something. And I was just, I was a wreck. But the idea that you have to be the one that knows everything. In the film we heard about, you feel like you have to be in control. It was hard, to realize and acknowledge that, no, I don't know everything, and then have to open my door and reach out for help. And I wonder, how do you deal with that, or is that something that's, no longer a play?
I face it up straight up front. I tell the kids, I'm like, I'm not a computer.
Yeah.
They ask me a question, I'm like, I don't know, let's find out. Hey, that sounds like a really cool project. Maybe we can ask some questions, we can figure it out. And move on that way.
And I think that's what I appreciated about seeing these teachers, is that all of them were teachable. And I think if we remember that, I've been teaching over 20 years, God, but if I stop learning, then, my kids are not going to grow. And I love, they put themselves in a place where they were being, given feedback, and you have to be able to receive criticism in order to get better. So, I love that we need to put ourselves out there, and I hope that inspires other teachers to put themselves out there, no matter how many years.
One of the things I noticed too was in the video when you gave the test back, and a lot of great students, a great percentage of your students failed, and then when you said, okay, whoever needs help, come join me in this corner, and then everyone walked there, but I couldn't help but notice your body language, like your face expression, and just seeing that face expression kind of just reminds me of of how I look in the classroom when, like, you know, it's like, you guys got this, right? Thumbs up, you guys got it? And then, you know, the test comes and it's like, you guys didn't get it. But it's just that, you know, kind of like.
Yeah, actually, and I have no idea what to do. And the fact that there was a camera that caught my facial expressions, it was like, I'm glad to share that with you, and I'm glad that teachers are seeing that, and we can like bond over that we all have these moments where we don't know what to do. But going back to Jorge's question, I think the biggest thing is like as teachers, we need to build kind of community and come together. I mean, we're all at different schools, but we're all sharing the same struggles. And I think that needs to be.
You know, and that's a great transition to another theme that I thought was so pivotal in this film, and that's the idea of mentorship. You know, the idea of having somebody that kind of takes you under the wing and says, "Hey, let's look at what you were doing. Let's see how we can do it better." But that's, I mean, I'm sure you know, you have your mentor, and he's been a help. But that seemed like such an idealized situation. You know, I honest to God, the instructions when I first started teaching was, you're going to be the afternoon teacher, kindergarten teacher. There's going to be a teacher there. You watch her for 3 hours, and you do what she does the next 3 hours. And that was my introduction into teaching. And it wasn't until 2 years later that I got a mentor, and it did make a world of difference. But you know, it just seems that maybe does it not come soon enough. And if it doesn't, what do you do then?
I think teaching is in my blood. I've like a 4th generation teacher now, and for me, it was like, is this really an option? Of course you're gonna be a teacher. And I've known since I was like, you know, yay big. My cohort members, we recently got our masters together. They were like, who do we talk to? I called my mom every day on the way home. Mom, you'll never guess what happened. She's like, well, this happened. And you're like, how did you know? She's like, it's happened to me 6 times in the last 4 years, you know? So to have that support has been incredible for me. But also the fact that we're a cohort of teachers that can rely on each other and bounce ideas off of each other, it's huge. That reflection aspect of it is so much easier to say to somebody, man, I really messed up on this part today, and then have them say, okay, this is how you can do it better, as opposed to you going home and sitting there thinking about your lesson and say, man, I really messed up on this, and I needed to do this better, and I wanted this to happen, and it didn't, and I ran out of time, and I ran out of time, and I ran out of time. And then to have somebody actually have some constructive feedback for you is insanely helpful.
I think building on that too, is the whole idea of just because schoolrooms are connected, that this one schoolhouse out in the prairie is different now, but teachers still face that isolation that we don't really see anymore. And so I kind of use a lot of social networking like Twitter and building up. There's a lot of teacher groups there that have really allow you to bounce ideas off of and get new technology ideas from and stuff like that. So I know that's been a big part of that whole isolation.
So we've got obviously reaching back to the family ties and the networks that exist within your school. We've got the social media. Anybody else have something that's worked for them as far as the support, the mentoring?
I think as far as mentoring, I think back at the teachers I had growing up, and which is the reason why I'm here, because of these particular teachers that I had in all the different grade levels. I think back and I'm like, and how they made class interesting and really something. It was a joy going into that classroom because this teacher made me feel special or made me feel, and so that's what I try to incorporate with my kids. As far as mentoring at school, unfortunately, I can't say that there's someone there. I'm sure there is, but it's probably, I feel isolated in that sense that.
But that is a real problem. I mean, I'm sure you have
yes.
some very talented teachers, but as Brian was alluding, you know, we still close our doors and we do what we have to do, and then got to get home to the rest of your life. So how?
I think for me, it's you have to just make yourself be vulnerable and just go out there and say, you know, I really messed up on this lesson. What is another way that I can do this lesson? What's another way? How have you done it? How have you done it? You know, oh, I didn't even get to this part of the lesson. How did you get there? And just basically be vulnerable and just say to others, yeah, I'm messing up on this, or how did you do this, or how did you do that? And it's, you know, it makes you feel scared and embarrassed that, oh, maybe I don't have it all together, because, you know, as teachers, we're control freaks. We're supposed to know everything. We're supposed to. But underneath, we're really just afraid and we want to make sure we're doing it right. So
I think that there's like the vocabulary that we have to use, like I did it wrong. I don't think it's a wrong thing. I mean, I'm not discrediting you, but I'm just saying like, it's like, well, this didn't work. What could I do differently? Let me try it this way. Like every single day, every single moment, every minute that I have in my classroom is like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try it this way. And I mean, I have like, I think 26 more days we have left, and I'm still trying I'm still trying new more things. I'm still trying new things in my classroom. I'm sure my kids are like, man, we do something different every day, but it's a practice, right? It's a practice.
Right, and I think it's all that reflection, and I noticed in the film, each of the teachers, it showed their actual reflection, their personal time. They're going home, you saw Matt going to buy books and thinking of his students, and that's what teachers do, is we're constantly thinking throughout the whole school year, and that reflective piece keeps you searching and listening to the students. What do they need? He got a cookbook or a book from China. I mean, how amazing is that? But that reflective makes that reflection on how the day went is what will catapult you into seeking more. Where do I get my answers? And asking questions. And one of them, we even went to a principal. His principal, I need your advice.
Let me stop you down on that, because I want to hear a little bit more, because it seems so critical, right? I mean, we saw the administrator sitting down with teacher. I know for a fact it doesn't happen in a lot of schools. I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere, but I know that the administrative job is just as challenging as what the teachers have going on, only in a different scale. So how do we, as educators, make up for that? We heard obviously the networking, the opening our doors, and saying I didn't quite meet my goal, but the reality is the administrator is who it's supposed to be our teacher leader. How do we make up for that? How do you make up for not having their attention when you need it?
Well, I think that even when you don't fail, you should still reflect. I'm always looking at my lesson and wondering, how can I improve it? How can I make it better? And I'm always looking at my students' point of view. They don't know how to get from A to Z. Well, how do I fill in those steps and scaffold their understanding so that they can get to Z? So I think reflection comes also when you have a successful lesson. You're always trying to make it better. I can count, it's countless times how many times I've gone back to my files and revised and revised. It's just part of what we do.
Let me transition, and it goes along those lines. The Malcolm Gladwell quote, you need to work at something 10,000 hours before you become proficient. If you translate that to teachers' years, that means about 6 or 7 years in the classroom. But at this point, we know that teacher attrition happens at between the 3rd and the 5th year. Right? I mean, so how do we balance all these things? Because once you start taking on all this extra load, you were talking about I felt like I was a teacher 24/7. I mean, I'd have dreams about teaching and was wondering, how do I bill for those, So how do we learn to create a balance so that we're not one of those statistics 3 to 5 years into it?
I bring in a lot of the things that I love and already do personally at home. I bring it into the classroom. So if I need to write a letter to somebody, my dad or my mom, I can use that as a model. Hey students, let's write a card today, a thank you card to so-and-so. I know in my classroom I have caring cards, and they're out there. So when students are done with their work, they can go get a caring card and send a little thank you note to whoever. So
go ahead, Joe.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I got 2 years ago, my second year, was by a teacher, because I was coming home every single day at 8 o'clock and I was just simply exhausted, and I was really just burning my candle at both ends. And a teacher who's been teaching for a long time told me it's not a sprint, right? It's a marathon, and we need to realize that, and realize that we're in this job for the long haul. And not to say too much about organizations that have teachers for just a few years, but we need to realize that this is a profession, and we want to do this for this is not just some job you do in the temporary. Like, this is we love our kids, and we want to be there not just for our kids now, but for our kids next year and the kids the year after that, right?
And that makes sense, but how do we physically turn that into reality?
I think a key part of the success in all of the teachers that were in the Teach documentary was the fact that they were open to change. They were open to trying out new things, new waves that are happening. You think about Common Core, student-centered learning, and that they were willing to take risks and willing to try things, anything, for their students. And that was the big message that came across to me. So I think that because of the fact that a lot of teachers may get jaded over time, for whatever reason, if they stay open to trying new things and be constantly evolving with what their students need, with what's happening in terms of technology, what's happening in educational reform, and they buy into trying new things, and then they can see the fruits of their labor like they did at the end of that film. That is what keeps that fire burning. And also, like Caroline was saying, bringing your own passion and your own interests into your teaching. I'm a singer, so I love to remix popular songs, to do educational videos, incorporating technology, because you have to stay current. You have to keep moving. You have these kids that don't learn the same anymore. They're digital learners. They can't learn out of a book anymore. So you yourself have to put yourself out there and be in touch with what's happening, and give that to the kids. And
let me challenge you on something, because you talked about the importance of change and being open to change. Yes. But we get blamed for being in one of the organizations or the career choices that changes the least. So are you finding that we are now embracing change as educators? I don't want to put any of your schools on blast or anything like that, but are you finding that it's open to change, or are you finding the resistance, Laurentino?
I've been in education for 20 years. And it took me a while to realize that education is a continuous search. I'm a true believer that there's something that makes every student click. And you can call it, I call it click. Okay? And we saw that in the film. The teachers were looking for what made that student click. And you think that's hard, try to find the click for the whole class. Yes. Okay? But it's there. We know it's there. And sometimes I've experienced at least once with a whole class, and I go like, wow, why did it take me that long to figure this one out? But let's continue search. And sometimes you find the click, and sometimes you don't.
So I think
but doesn't mean you give up, though. You keep looking for it.
Yes. So that 10,000 hours you were talking about, I don't think you ever perfect teaching. It doesn't apply. But what we do perfect are understanding the school system and understanding that kids learn differently. And you might see patterns, and this reminds me of my student I had 5 years ago or 3 years ago, or you try different things. Or it might be routines or patterns, management, behavior, those things we learn. And curriculum you can learn. But, not with Common Core now. Well, that's a whole different enchilada. But, it's constantly learning.
We were talking about earlier, too. It's the whole idea of taking risks. And back in the open court days when everything was very scripted, it had a saying, at least in some of the schools I was at, shut the door and teach. Kind of like shut the door and actually teach. Because you need to be creative as a teacher and put yourself out there and risk failure. I mean, anybody that says they're in teaching and are 100% successful aren't telling the truth. I mean, you face it, but that's what gives...
I'm going to re-ask the question. Are you finding that the educational environment is now more open to this change that we're talking about, or are we still seeing resistance?
I think that's a really broad question. Yeah. It depends what you're talking about. I'm seeing great things happen in classrooms at my school, and I'm pretty sure at your guys' school as well. And so, to say the entire throughout the entire education? Are we talking about the district or the union or even our classrooms?
Yeah, let me clarify, because
classrooms?
I'm talking about the fact that I look at LA Times, I'll read articles about education, and then the most interesting part is always at the bottom, the comments. And everybody happens to know everything about education except teachers, right? So it seems like there's this belief that teachers are just sitting there, you pull out the diddles that you've been pulling out for the last 20 years and you just, run 30 copies of this, and there is that perception that we don't want to change, and this is why the education system is broken.
And
so
yes, go ahead. And I think I want to comment, if I could be so bold as to make this general statement. I think it's changing in some ways with the younger teachers that are already, digital natives. and with our other layer of our older, and I don't want to say that, I'm older, but I can appreciate that I still learn from the younger, the ones that are just fresh out. And I think that for me to admit that, and for all of us to keep admitting that we need to grow, yes, it's changing, but there's still a lot to go.
Well, I happen to know for a fact that we have some very innovative and distinguished
Yes.
innovator educators in this audience. And so I guess without putting the spotlight on you, I'd like to hear about how this innovation has been received and whether, your school is lifting you up and saying, check this out, here's who we need to be like, or do you need to do it quietly so that, you don't stand out too much and then you're like, hey, what are you doing? You're making us look bad.
I know with my school and district, they've really been pushing something called Ready, Fire, Aim, because Common Core is out and they want to try different perspectives on a certain thing, which I love because it's given me a creative atmosphere and has allowed me to use apps like TouchCast and stuff where the kids have actually gone on and created their videos and used the creative process in science, which is nice because it's involving writing in science and other subjects and stuff. But I know that I just love the creative process that they allowed with that open, the Common Core standards opened up in that area about more of the process rather than the student will know. It's more of the student will explore this issue or see this issue. I kind of like
Jorge, I think that teachers do want to change and they want to keep up, but sometimes we feel held back by sometimes the standards that were put in front of us or the policies set by administrators. With the Common Core standards coming out, we have been given a lot more freedom, and so the pendulum is now swinging back to the teachers wanting change, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that. Just for example, at my school, we've been doing a lot more flipped classrooms, mastery learning styles, incorporating the technology, the iPads, the Chromebooks, all sorts of things, and luckily our administrators are on board with that, but some teachers are still being held back by policies that are set forth. But hopefully, it will continue to go in the direction of change because teachers do want to change.
Jump in. I
In
know
the
you
same
want.
way, I don't think teachers that are doing the same thing every year are put on a pedestal necessarily by our administration, by our colleagues. There are certain teachers that have been doing it for 30 years and they've been doing it successfully for 30 years in a very similar way. But that doesn't mean that you can't relate to your students still. The fact that I think sometimes we forget that when we're teachers, we're dealing with children and we're not dealing with the adults. And so as soon as we can get the adults out of the classroom, we can get the policy out of the classroom. As soon as we get all of that, and we have that personal style that you can go ahead and put into your teaching, it makes a world of difference. I love the fact he talked about what he wears to school every day. It's that sort of stuff is so, you don't think about it when you're thinking about the fact that you got to be a teacher, but the kids are amazingly, they notice when, like this beard, this little, hair is out of place, mister, fix that.
I totally agree. Like, I always tell myself, it's my classroom is their world. I'm just in it.
Yeah.
It's their world. You guys are running it. I mean, I'm facilitating. I am the facilitator. I'm guiding you to where you need to go.
Yeah, I think that's the new role for the teacher too. If I could go back to what you were saying about how maybe veteran teachers are less likely or willing to change, and it's the young teachers that are leading. I have a really special opportunity because I'm a special ed teacher to collaborate with actually 4 other teachers. Brenda and I teach at the same school at Holland Crest. And, I teach with veteran teachers that are just as willing and just as open to incorporate technology. I'm a PBS Learning Media Digital Innovator.
That's right.
Yay, PBS!
That's right.
And,
Yay, PBS.
And I work with a veteran teacher who's actually a vice president of our California Teachers Association. Anyway, so she has been in the trenches. She's been doing it for so long, and she is still open to trying new things. She's actually a technology teacher. So we've worked together in our collaborative class to use Edmodo. So students are responding digitally, in this kind of digital learning community where we're showing media, we're asking questions, we're having higher level discussion questions. And they struggle with writing, but they're interacting in a way that's really, really beneficial for kind of the expectations of Common Core and assessment.
You know, I want to jump in because we've been dancing all over the technology issue a couple of times, and we saw it even in the film where, you know, this is not the first time that new technology has come into education, and sometimes it's seen as the magic bullet, and there's fears that that's going to replace the teacher, and ultimately we know that it's the teacher that makes the difference. But I am very interested in perhaps in your own personal experiences how you're leveraging technology to make it more like their world, like you're saying, because it is their classroom and their world is you know, technology is a given. So how are you having success? How are you integrating technology? How are you finding that it's how are you managing it as a tool? Because it's not the be all end all. And I'm going to start with somebody who I know has a lot of input on this, Warren.
Jorge, what I'm hearing here is just amazing. But first of all, the vulnerability and allowing yourself to say, I don't know, let's figure it out. Secondly, with Common Core coming in and we are taken back, we're saying, what is this all about? But what I love with Common Core is moving away from the cut and dried. Common Core is moving toward, let's explore, let's figure it out. What does it mean to you? Explain what you've learned so I can understand it, so it means something to me. The change that you made at the beginning when you started up there lecturing, when I saw you walking across the street leading those kids into the community, you know, that took a lot of courage.
It was hard. That was really hard, actually.
That took courage, but when I saw that you had those kids, because it took kids for them, number one, to show up on a Saturday, and number two, to walk into their neighborhood and talk to their neighbors and the people they were with. But it transformed them. At the end, when you were sitting on the floor with them, I was saying, this is what our kids need, this is what they want. You were still in authority. That wasn't the issue. You were still in control. You were actually more in control. But that's what technology does. These kids have it in their pockets. When we start allowing the kids to tell what they've learned, prove to me, do it with music, do it with pictures, do it with sound, do it with the power of your world. It changes the whole game. And that's what gets me excited.
And I think going back to just technology use in the classroom, I think it's amazing. I mean, we're going all iPads in the district, and I'm all for it. But the thing is, we need to make sure we use technology also with purpose. I've seen many times teachers like, I'm going to do this, and I've probably done it myself. Like, I'm just going to use Twitter. But then I've had a lot of older teachers be like, how are we going to use it? Or even just other, you know, what's the best way to get kids to learn? And so I think just technology with purpose is the key.
And I didn't mean, and I want to redeem myself. I don't want to say that you know, veteran teachers don't want to learn. I just think that we don't have the know-how sometimes, and you know, it is hard to admit that, because you know, when I'm asking my own child, how do I do this, you know, and so and the students even help me if I, you know, and I'm not saying I'm completely illiterate, but what I'm saying is, you're right. I want to know how to use it where it's meaningful and purposeful. And you know, as it is now, everybody's in different places with technology. I don't have the technology.
But let me jump in on that, Becky, because I see a lot of head nodding, and I'm really interested in find out, because you're talking about not only how you're changing, but it sounds to me like the dynamic in your classroom is changing, because now students are like, oh, I know this, and the teacher doesn't. And I see a lot of head nodding, so I'd like to hear more about that. How is that changing the dynamic in your classroom?
For me, I have a student that's actually in charge of the laptop. He's in charge of turning on the projector. He's in charge of all of that. And he knows how to do Control-Alt-Delete. He knows when the projector is not working. I've taught him how to do all of that. And he knows he's my computer helper. But there are other students in my class that do that. And I tell them, Miss Asberg doesn't always know everything. It's important that you teach me too. And Miss Asberg has a clip too, so in case I make a mistake, because we all make mistakes as adults, Miss Asberg has to move her clip down too. So they have to see that, you know, I'm learning, they're learning, I Google it, they Google it, we all trying to figure it out together. And
I want actually, Misha, I think you were going to make a point, and I wanted to make sure.
I was actually going to say pretty much the same thing, that my students have this great sense of ownership in their ability to use technology. They feel a sense of pride if I don't know how to do something, that, you know, I can show Ms. Hamlet how to do it, and I can do this job. And it's like a community thing, that they have this source of knowledge and they're tapping into it at home, and they come to school and they transfer the knowledge there. it's ownership and it's pride for them in the learning environment already.
Deanna, I know you were, go ahead.
I went to a conference, Center X conference recently, and I learned that, you know, there's a lot of teachers, I guess veteran teachers, that are not exactly sure how to use technology. And I was in there telling them about some of the things that I was doing. And so I think it's very important that teachers share the resources, share what they're doing, talk to others about what they're doing, what they're making, because sometimes, you know, you need to come out of your bubble and say, oh, you know, that's so great. I hadn't thought about that. It's, you know, it might be something simple, but since you're in your own little bubble, you can't think of it. And something that I shared was that in my first grade class, out of school, we don't have the iPads yet. We don't have like all the technology, but with the, you know, older computers that we have, they're like these big old chunky computers. These first graders were able to make PowerPoint presentations. We were doing opinion writing. They did it on each, you know, instead of having like on paper, they wrote their topic sentence, their transition words, their 3 reasons on there, on the PowerPoint, each slide. They learned how to use the slides. They learned, and then after they started playing with font, started playing with like the background color, and I didn't teach them that. They just started playing around. And I was having trouble because I'm the only teacher there with like 24 kids. How am I going to teach each kid? We don't even have a projector screen to show them how.
I'm going to jump in only because you're dancing around something that I want to make sure we talked about, and we're getting kind of close on time here, and that is assessment. Because I'm listening to you and you're telling me what the kids are doing, and I'm already visualizing how they're learning. Yet we saw in the film clearly that what's going to happen at the end is that they got to fill in the right bubble. Otherwise, and I go back to Shelby and I see her going, you're watching them fill in the wrong. And I want to hear from you. How do you get past that when you know that all of this excitement, all of this you know, energy that the kids are bringing, and the passion and the changes, and they gotta fill in a bubble to be validated? So I want to hear your thoughts about that, if we could.
Does assessment assess the students or the teacher? Basically, what we hear now is assessment is to assess the teacher. And as we saw in the film, because the kids didn't do well in the assessment, it didn't mean that they weren't getting good instruction. And you know, there's a mixed message here with the assessment.
I think with the assessment needs to change. You know, bubbling it in. You know,
doesn't measure
Common
learning.
Core, more broad explanation. You know, everyone has a different process or journey to get to that answer.
Right.
And is Common Core going to help us?
I think it's
Absolutely.
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Common Core, because we've been kind of piloting and stuff on the iPad stuff, but I've noticed that it emphasizes the digital divide, especially between students that, I'm at a Title I school that does not have the technology at home. So here they are trying to access this test. Not only are they trying to think of the test, but how to navigate this iPad that they have never had contact with before. So that could skew results as well, which is something that's...
Well, I think I'm going to have to leave it at the we don't know yet, because, you know, we have been having a dynamic and engaging conversation. I want to thank all of you, but we have come to the end of our show. Now, I have some good news. If you are a teacher and you'd like a free DVD of Teach from Participant Media, or perhaps you'd like to host your own screening, go online to takepart.com/teach to sign up and receive a copy of the film. I want to thank all of our teachers who joined us in studio today, and thank you at home for joining us here on KLCS. Have a good night.